Before we dive in, I'd like to remind you to hit the subscribe button. Currently, only 0.7% of my viewers are subscribed. Once we hit 1,000 subscribers, I'll release an exclusive special video just for you. The quiet, suburban neighborhood was just like any other, a place where families lived in peaceful harmony, with tidy lawns and houses that all looked strikingly similar. It was the kind of community where people stuck to the rules, kept to themselves, and rarely rocked the boat. Jack Peterson, a retired military veteran, had moved to this area to finally enjoy some peace and quiet after decades of serving his country. He was a man of routine, now adjusting to civilian life with a new sense of freedom. But despite the calm and controlled nature of the neighborhood, there was one thing that would inevitably shake up this utopian order: Jack's American flag. Jack, who had served for over 20 years, believed in the flag's significance, both as a symbol of his sacrifices and as a testament to his love for his country. It wasn't a grand display, just a small flag on a pole outside his front door, something he had always done in his years of service, and something he carried with him into retirement. To him, it was a symbol of pride, of honor, and a reminder of his brothers and sisters in arms. His neighbors, initially unaware of what the flag represented to him, would soon find out. Then came Karen Thompson. Karen, the self-appointed neighborhood enforcer, was the epitome of a rule-abiding citizen, at least in her eyes. She had lived in the community for years and in that time had taken it upon herself to uphold every rule, every guideline, and every regulation that came with living under the HOA's watchful eye. Karen was quick to notice Jack's flag. At first, she didn't say anything, though she couldn't help but feel a sense of irritation every time she walked past it. It was too noticeable, too bold for her tastes. While the rest of the neighborhood seemed to have embraced a neutral palette of beige, brown, and white, Jack's flag stood out like a beacon, drawing attention where it wasn't wanted. As days passed, her irritation only grew. She couldn't understand why someone would dare to display something so personal, so potentially disruptive to the neighborhood's aesthetic. Finally, Karen couldn't take it any longer. She decided to pay Jack a visit, hoping that a simple request would solve the matter. One warm afternoon, she knocked on his door. When Jack opened the door, he was greeted by Karen's polite but firm demeanor. She wasted no time in getting to the point, informing him that his flag violated the community's HOA guidelines, which prohibited any form of personal expression outside the home. It was an unwritten rule among most residents that the neighborhood would maintain an air of uniformity and peace, and Jack's flag, as harmless as it seemed to him, was a breach of that order. Jack, taken aback, didn't immediately understand the issue. He had flown that same flag for years without a problem, and as a veteran, he felt it was his right to display it. Karen, however, was resolute in her stance. She told him, without hesitation, that the flag had to come down. It was a matter of following the rules, after all. Jack listened patiently, his mind working through the options. He had always respected rules, but this felt different. This was not just about rules. It was about his identity, his service, and his connection to something far greater than a mere decoration. The conversation ended with Karen storming off, threatening that the HOA would be involved if the flag wasn't taken down. Jack, though unsettled by the encounter, stood his ground, refusing to remove what he considered a personal and deeply meaningful symbol. Jack had hoped that Karen would let the matter go, but as days passed, he began to receive formal letters from the HOA. The letters, signed by the HOA board, outlined that Jack's flag was indeed a violation of the community's rules, and that he had a limited time to take it down before he would face fines and penalties. Jack's frustration grew, but he was not ready to back down. This wasn't just about a flag. It was about his rights as a homeowner, as a veteran, and as a person who had served his country. He was determined to fight for what he believed was his right to express his patriotism in a simple and respectful way. Jack began researching the legal aspects of the situation. As a military veteran, he knew there were laws that protected his right to display the American flag. The more he researched, the more confident he became in his position. He discovered that both state and federal law upheld the right of citizens to fly the flag, regardless of local ordinances. Armed with this new knowledge, Jack was ready for whatever the HOA threw at him. He knew he had the law on his side. Meanwhile, Karen was not ready to let this go. She saw Jack's refusal to comply as a challenge to her authority. She began speaking to other members of the HOA, rallying support for her cause. Some neighbors sided with her, agreeing that the flag was too ostentatious and disrupted the uniformity of the neighborhood. Others, however, began to question Karen's motives. Jack wasn't the only one who had seen her as overbearing in the past. But Karen's influence in the community was strong, and she was determined to win this battle. As tensions rose, Jack started receiving messages from some of his neighbors, offering support and encouraging him to stand firm. They respected his service and his right to express his patriotism. Slowly, the neighborhood became divided, with Jack becoming a symbol of resistance against Karen's unyielding enforcement of rules. But as Jack prepared for the legal battle ahead, little did he know that Karen had more tricks up her sleeve. Determined to win at any cost, she began spreading rumors about the flag. She claimed it was disrespectfully displayed, that it was too large, too bold, and that it violated every aesthetic principle of the neighborhood. She accused Jack of flaunting his military service for attention, and went as far as claiming that the flag itself was a symbol of extremism. Karen's fabrications quickly gained traction among those who already supported her, and Jack found himself under fire from both the HOA and some of his neighbors. The situation was escalating, but Jack remained determined to fight back. It was no longer just about the flag. It was about standing up for what was right and making sure his voice and the voices of others who supported him were heard. He reached out to local media, hoping to share his side of the story with the broader community. What followed was a wave of support from veteran citizens and even people from surrounding neighborhoods. The story of a veteran standing up for his rights against a power-hungry neighbor quickly became a rallying cry for many. As the conflict over the flag intensified, Jack found himself standing at the crossroads of personal conviction and the power of a community that valued conformity above all else. Karen, frustrated by her inability to persuade Jack, had escalated the situation to the HOA board. The board, a group of neighbors who had volunteered to enforce the rules, took Karen's complaint seriously. Jack soon received a formal letter from the HOA outlining that his flag violated the community's guidelines and had to be taken down immediately. The letter threatened fines and legal action if Jack refused to comply. This was no longer a simple disagreement between neighbors. This had become a battle over the very rights Jack had fought for. The legal implications began to sink in, and Jack realized the gravity of the situation. He could either give in and remove the flag, compromising his principles, or he could stand up for what he believed in and risk a protracted legal fight. Jack had never backed down from a challenge in his life, and this was no exception. He decided to confront the HOA head-on. But as he prepared for a legal battle, Jack's first step was to gather more information. He knew the HOA could argue that his flag violated aesthetic standards or disrupted the neighborhood's peace. However, Jack was confident that there was more to his right to display the flag than just following HOA guidelines. He started researching the law, searching for any loopholes that might give him an advantage. The more he delved into his research, the clearer his position became. He discovered that, as a military veteran, he had the legal right to display the flag at his residence, regardless of local ordinances or HOA rules. He even found that there were state and federal protections in place specifically for veterans, ensuring their rights to fly the flag were upheld. Jack's newfound confidence was bolstered by the support he began receiving from various organizations and individuals who rallied behind his cause. Local veteran groups, military families, and even online communities rallied to Jack's side. The outpouring of support was overwhelming, and it gave Jack the strength to continue standing his ground. He knew this was more than just a personal dispute with Karen. It was about defending the rights of every individual who had fought for freedom and liberty. The flag wasn't just a piece of cloth to Jack. It was a living, breathing symbol of the sacrifices made by thousands of soldiers who had fought for the country. The HOA, on the other hand, was determined to defend its position. They had sided with Karen from the start and weren't about to back down now. In their eyes, it wasn't just about one flag. It was about maintaining the aesthetic purity of the neighborhood. The HOA was well aware that if one rule was allowed to be broken, others might follow, and before long, the neighborhood could descend into chaos. They had made it clear that Jack's flag was a violation of their rules, and they weren't going to let it go without a fight. The HOA sent Jack several more notices, warning him that fines would start accumulating if the flag wasn't removed. The pressure mounted. Jack found himself at a crossroads, unsure how to proceed. He had no intention of backing down, but he also knew the legal battle ahead would be long, costly, and emotionally draining. It wasn't just about the flag anymore. It was about the principle of standing up for what was right, no matter the cost. Jack's determination grew stronger with each passing day, as he realized that this was a fight he couldn't afford to lose. Karen, however, wasn't about to let Jack off the hook so easily. She continued to wage her own campaign against him, going door to door in the neighborhood to drum up support for the HOA's stance. She would tell anyone who would listen that Jack's flag was disruptive and that it threatened the peaceful, uniform aesthetic of the neighborhood. She accused Jack of flaunting his military service, making a spectacle of something that should have been a private matter. Karen's arguments grew more personal and emotional, and she began to question Jack's patriotism. Was he truly a patriot, or was he simply using the flag for attention? Jack was deeply hurt by these accusations. His service had been about protecting the freedoms of everyone, not making a statement for personal gain. The flag was a symbol of sacrifice, not self-promotion. But the more Karen spoke, the more people in the neighborhood began to question Jack's intentions. Some neighbors who had initially supported him started to waver, swayed by Karen's insistence that the flag was too bold, too prominent, and too disruptive. The once tight-knit neighborhood was now divided. Jack had always prided himself on being a quiet, peaceful man, content with his privacy. But now, he found himself at the center of a storm, caught between the principles of freedom and the power of an HOA that demanded conformity. The neighborhood's unity was crumbling under the weight of the argument, and Jack could feel the pressure building. Despite the mounting tension, Jack refused to back down. He knew that he couldn't let Karen's personal vendetta against him influence the larger debate about freedom and expression. With the legal battle on the horizon, Jack prepared to take his case to court. It wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring that the right to display the American flag remained protected for everyone, especially those who had served in the military. This was about more than just one flag. It was about the future of his community and the principles that had been fought for and won through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. As Jack prepared for the legal showdown, he realized that the outcome would have far-reaching consequences, not just for him, but for the entire neighborhood. The HOA, as powerful as it was, could not infringe upon his rights as a citizen and a veteran. And though Karen was relentless in her pursuit to have the flag removed, Jack had something she didn't: the law, the support of his fellow veterans, and the unshakable belief that what he was doing was right. With all this backing him up, Jack knew he could win. But he also knew that the battle was far from over. The next step would be to take his fight into the courtroom, where the real struggle for his rights would unfold. The day of the court hearing arrived, and Jack stood tall, filled with a mixture of nervousness and resolve. He had never imagined that something as simple as displaying the American flag would lead to this moment. A legal showdown with the HOA, with his neighbors and their rules on one side, and his rights as a veteran and an American citizen on the other. The courtroom was packed, not with legal experts or politicians, but with concerned citizens, veterans, and neighbors, all curious to see how the case would unfold. Some were there to support Jack, while others, including Karen and the HOA representatives, had shown up to ensure that the rules would not be bent. The atmosphere was thick with tension as the case began. Karen, flanked by the HOA board members, was the first to take the stand. She presented her argument with conviction, painting Jack as someone who was deliberately defying the neighborhood standards for personal gain. She argued that the flag was an eyesore, disrupting the peaceful environment of the community, and claimed it went against the aesthetic guidelines that had been in place for years. She even went as far as to accuse Jack of using the flag as a form of self-promotion, suggesting that it was part of an ego-driven agenda rather than a symbol of his patriotism. Jack's lawyer, a seasoned attorney with experience in civil rights cases, took the floor next. With a calm but determined voice, he laid out the case for Jack's right to display the American flag. He referenced the flag code of the United States and pointed out that both state and federal law protected Jack's right to fly the flag, regardless of the HOA's rules. His argument was simple yet powerful. While the HOA had the right to enforce community standards, it could not infringe on basic constitutional rights, particularly when those rights were tied to the freedoms that so many had fought to protect. Jack's lawyer also argued that the HOA's decision to target Jack's flag was not just a matter of aesthetics, but an attack on his personal freedoms as a veteran. The flag, he explained, was more than just a decoration. It was a part of Jack's identity, a symbol of his sacrifice and service to the nation. The attorney emphasized that the community's rules could not supersede the fundamental rights of an individual, especially in a matter as personal as displaying the flag of the United States. As the day wore on, it became clear that the case was not just about a flag. It was about the larger issue of individual rights versus community rules, and the balance that must be struck between the two. The judge, an experienced figure who had presided over many cases involving homeowners associations, listened carefully to both sides. He asked probing questions, seeking to understand whether the HOA's rules were being applied fairly or whether Jack's right to display the flag was being unjustly limited. After hours of deliberation, the judge finally gave his ruling. The courtroom fell silent as he announced his decision. Jack had the right to display the flag, and the HOA's demand for its removal was unconstitutional. The judge cited the legal protections for veterans and emphasized that while the HOA could enforce community guidelines, it could not violate a resident's basic rights, especially when it came to freedom of expression. The ruling was a victory not just for Jack, but for anyone who believed that individual rights should never be trampled by arbitrary rules. Karen's face fell as she realized she had lost. The HOA board members exchanged uncomfortable glances, while the courtroom erupted in applause. Jack, though relieved, remained composed. He had never expected this battle to be easy, but now that it was over, he felt a sense of justice that washed over him. The flag would stay, and with it, the symbol of his dedication to his country and his right to express himself. But just as the victory began to sink in, an unexpected twist unfolded. As Jack stood up to leave the courtroom, a reporter approached him with a microphone. The reporter, having covered the case from the beginning, asked Jack how he felt about the ruling. Jack paused for a moment before answering, but as he spoke, a surprising revelation emerged. "I appreciate the support, but there's something I need to say," Jack began, his voice steady but with a touch of emotion. "I'm not just fighting for my flag. I'm fighting for every person who's ever felt like their voice didn't matter. This victory isn't just about me. It's about all of us standing together to protect our rights, no matter how small the issue may seem. We can't let people like Karen or organizations like this HOA think they can push us around because they don't understand what it means to truly stand for something." The reporter's eyes widened as Jack's words resonated with everyone in the room. It wasn't just about the flag. It was about standing up for freedom, even when it seems like the odds are stacked against you. The story quickly made headlines, not just locally but across the nation. Jack's battle had struck a chord with people from all walks of life, especially veterans, who understood all too well the sacrifices made for the freedoms they often took for granted. Karen, meanwhile, found herself the subject of public scorn. The more people learned about her obsessive enforcement of rules and her personal vendetta against Jack, the more her reputation deteriorated. Neighbors who had once supported her began to distance themselves, realizing that her actions went far beyond protecting the neighborhood's aesthetic. Some began to speak out, sharing their own frustrations with her authoritarian approach. Eventually, Karen's influence within the HOA crumbled. The community had had enough. In an unexpected twist, it wasn't just Jack's victory that changed the neighborhood. It was a collective realization that they, too, had the power to stand up for what was right. As Karen's power waned, new members were elected to the HOA, individuals who valued community, diversity, and personal freedoms over blind conformity. The neighborhood began to heal, and Jack's flag became a symbol of unity and strength, a reminder that standing up for your rights, no matter how small or large, was a victory for everyone. As the story spread, Jack received countless messages of support. People from all over the country reached out, thanking him for his bravery and for reminding them of the importance of freedom and expression. The media dubbed him a hero, not just for his military service, but for his courage in standing up for the values that had shaped the nation. In the end, the real victory wasn't just a ruling in Jack's favor. It was the way the community, the media, and the public came together to stand for something bigger than themselves. Jack had fought for his flag, but in doing so, he had reminded everyone of the values that made the country great in the first place. Freedom, unity, and the unyielding belief that no one should ever be made to feel small for expressing their beliefs. Jack's journey was over, but the impact of his story would be felt for years to come. The flag would fly proudly outside his house, a symbol of his service, his freedom, and the victory that came from standing up for what was right.